What exactly is a Mary Sue? No, it's not that. Ever since social justice decided to disgrace the stage with its terrible everything, the term Mary Sue has become a common critique of SJW characters, and sexist. Why might that be? Well, your standard Mary Sue typically possesses traits like being loved by everyone regardless of how they act. Anyone who actually does dislike them is evil. They're always right. Anyone who disagrees with them is always wrong. Their comebacks are always considered clever and witty. They're smarter than everyone, faster than everyone, and more powerful than everyone. They're the best at anything they do, even if they've never tried it before. They don't have flaws, or if they do, it's something small like being clumsy, or the opposite like being too pretty. Yes, that's real. Any of that starting to sound eerily familiar? You see this a lot in fan fiction, probably because the natural habitat of the Mary Sue is fan fiction. This likely stems from an author wanting to place themselves in the world of their favorite series, but not their real selves, with all the nasty human elements. Their ideal selves, the one with the great hair, the perfect looks, and the existent social skills. In 1974, a brilliant parody of your standard Mary Sue story was written by Paula Smith in her fan fiction masterpiece, A Trekkie's Tale, also known as the story that originated the term Mary Sue. The 70s was the decade when fan-written works were starting to hit mainstream popularity. There were even fan magazines where such works could be published, and at the time, one of the most popular shows to write fan fiction about was the original Star Trek. Paula Smith's story was published in one such fanzine called Menagerie. A Trekkie's Tale stars a 15-year-old Lieutenant Mary Sue, making her a ludicrously young, super talented genius. Everyone loves her, so she gets to play hard to get with the most famous men in the Federation. She's half Vulcan, and by the end, she not only saves Kirk and Spock from certain doom, but single-handedly saves the entire Enterprise. And of course, she dies tragically, so everyone can not only mourn her passing, but lament on what terrible a loss her death really was. But it was all just silly fan fiction, until we got Wesley Crusher, who fans hated, and unfortunately who never died via bayonet stabbing. Basically, the simple mainstream definition is a character who is too perfect. But being powerful, liked, and good at things are more like indicators than actual evidence that the character you're looking at is a Mary Sue. After all, we have characters like Superman, who's loved by the people, talented, and absurdly powerful even by superhero standards, but is still one of the 3 banner characters for DC Comics. So, that leaves us with the question, if Superman, a character whose superpower is to have all the powers, can still be held in such high regard, what is it that really makes a Mary Sue? And more than that, why are they so despised? Typically, characters are made to fill roles needed to tell a story, kind of like casting for a play. For example, Little Red Riding Hood has Red Riding Hood as the main character, the Bad Wolf as the threat, the grandmother gives Red her motivation, and in modern tellings, the huntsman comes along to vanquish the evil wolf and save the day. However, Mary Sues aren't born to tell a story. They're born to fulfill an author's power fantasy, and each reason an author has for making their Mary Sue creates a nasty little subspecies. Like the copycat Sue, where the author creates their own original character by giving them the same abilities and similar origin story as their favorite character in their favorite series, except even better. And probably female. Strange how that works. Anyway, they'll make these characters even if it doesn't make any sense. Sort of like writing an Avatar The Last Airbender fanfic and making your original character an airbender despite them being wiped out, hence the word last in the title. Or better yet, a second Avatar, even though that's impossible, and one that not only has mastered all the elements already, but probably also mastered some secret element no one's ever heard of. And that perfectly highlights what really makes a Mary Sue. In most stories, even the most powerful characters have to bend to the laws of their universe. Lord Voldemort, for example, may have been the Dark Lord, but he still had to follow the rules of magic and pay the price every time he used the more potent stuff. Darth Vader, the most powerful Force user in the galaxy far, far away, was still prevented from raising the dead because he remained bound to his own limitations in the Force. Even Superman, one of, if not the, most powerful superhero in existence, is bound by the laws of his own universe. The love he gets from the people, he earned it through good deeds and sacrifice. And Superman may be powerful, but we see the breadth of that power can be a burden, especially when he's confronted with the fact that despite being the most powerful man alive, he can't always right every wrong. If you look closely, there's only one real underlying element that positively identifies a character as a Mary Sue. While normal characters are stuck obeying the laws of their own universe, in the case of a Mary Sue, the universe bends to obey the character. What do I mean by that? Let's go back to Wesley Crusher. In Star Trek The Next Generation, the starship Enterprise is the flagship of the Federation, and therefore is staffed with the smartest, bravest, and most accomplished people in Starfleet. And Diana Troy. Wesley Crusher was a teenage boy who lived on the ship and was Gene Roddenberry's very own canon Mary Sue, or Marty Stu if you want to get technical. Wesley is infamous for single-handedly saving the Enterprise on several occasions, thanks to being such an impossible super genius. How impossible exactly? So impossible that this boy with no Starfleet training can outsmart entire engineering teams and do in minutes what well-trained professionals couldn't do in weeks. He also gets promoted to acting ensign, allowed free reign of the ship, and anyone who opposes him is wrong for doing so. In other words, the Enterprise crew is comprised of the best in Starfleet, until Wesley becomes the focus and the Enterprise crew drops 100 IQ points, and the universe bends to create improbable scenarios, all to make Wesley look good. But Wesley has nothing compared to this new breed of Mary Sue, this dark new fusion between two of media's deadliest diseases, the Mary Sue and social justice. Social justice is like a zombie plague. It makes everything worse. It's kind of like we were battling Nazis, and now thanks to social justice, we're battling Nazi zombies. Or we made some friends with some cool people, but the social justice virus turned them into evil, soulless monsters that feed off happiness. Or you finally met that beautiful woman of your dreams, and now social justice has changed her into a hideous abomination that feeds on the blood of men. And now it's infected the Mary Sue, which isn't just bad, it's a nightmare scenario. But is every SJW hero a Mary Sue? Probably not. Some, I assume, are good characters. However, while the normal Mary Sue plays out power fantasies, like being smart and beautiful, the SJW Sue's fantasy is fulfilling all the author's social justice bias. All good men are gay or submissive, straight white men are evil, your chosen minority is the wisest, smartest, most misunderstood, and most productive people despite being savagely oppressed. America is portrayed as treating women and minorities like Jews in Nazi Germany. Anyone who holds opinions you don't agree with is a literal Nazi, and the universe of an SJW story bends to justify anything their character does. Rey from the new Star Wars trilogy is probably the most mainstream of SJW Mary Sue's. Her character is devoid of imagination, has no personality to speak of, and according to the people who work on modern Star Wars, is completely without weaknesses. And that last part in particular is pushed as a virtue rather than a dirty writing sin. They made her the perfect feminist role model instead of a relatable character with humanity. I can only guess that her lack of weaknesses was to make her an inspiration to little girls, which only makes sense if you don't know what a role model actually is. Unless you think a person who's never had a problem walking would make a great role model for people who are stuck in wheelchairs, because he doesn't have any trouble walking. Or a skinny person who's never been fat in their entire lives would make a great role model for people trying to lose weight because he doesn't have a weight problem. But what really flags her as a Mary Sue is not her ability to live alone, or single-handedly fight off enemies twice her size, or fix the Millennium Falcon better than its owner can. I'm not even going to dock her for being born to space trash parents. It's the fact that the universe just gives her everything. I mean, they stop at a bar that just so happens to have Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. Not a lightsaber, but Luke's lightsaber. She develops force powers on the fly and can use them effectively with zero training and zero knowledge on the subject, and was able to defeat Kylo Ren in a lightsaber duel, a man who was personally trained by Luke Skywalker and was able to wage a successful rebellion against his former teacher. So, how much training do you think Rey had in lightsaber combat before beating someone trained in lightsaber combat? That's right, zero. Anakin Skywalker was also a Mary Sue. After all, he did manage to take down a droid command ship on his own when he was like 9, and the universe almost literally revolved around him. I mean, he had his own prophecy and everything. But here's the thing, Anakin still needed to be trained before he could use force powers effectively. Think on that a moment. Anakin was pretty much a living avatar of the Force, and he still needed years of training to actually use the Force. Every major Jedi character had to go through some kind of training before they were able to do the cool Jedi stuff, even if it was just mentioned in passing, like with Anakin, or Starkiller if you played Force Unleashed. So on top of being completely without weaknesses, Rey also doesn't have to work for anything. If she needs it, well, she's just handed the solution because the Star Wars writers are trying to convey a message rather than tell a story. Say what you want about George Lucas, at least his goal was to tell a story. An easily marketable story, but a story. Now let's look at another example. Black Widow, aka Natasha Romanoff, while I wouldn't consider her a Mary Sue character, yet has much less of a character than she could have because social justice warriors won't allow her any weaknesses. The famous outrage brought on by the Age of Ultron movie that caused Joss Whedon to evacuate Twitter was sparked because Black Widow finally got a moment of vulnerability. Oh sure, we've seen her brood over her dark past before, but that was cool, edgy superhero stuff. Plus, all that mention of red she had in her ledger probably appealed to the cat lady crowd. Natasha revealed that she was made infertile to make her a better spy/assassin, since having a child would understandably compromise her willingness to kill. This is kind of like the female equivalent of castrating a man so he can concentrate on his job without the pesky lust kicking in, Unsullied style. They'd taken away a core element of her womanhood so she could be a tool for murder. And in her eyes, this made her a monster. And in response, feminists were like, hey, she should be out getting abortions and killing men, not having pesky humanity. I mean, we're doing just fine without it. In that moment, Black Widow had committed a cardinal sin of social justice. She felt shame. And in the world of social justice, no one should feel shame for anything ever, unless you vote Republican, I guess. Keep up the good work, Ethan. Needless to say, being raised by television and pop culture references tends to result in people who can't human very well. Audiences have waged a long war against the Mary Sue, and for a while, the audience was winning. We get more complicated characters with flaws, motivations, and desires. Perhaps the greatest sin of an SJW Sue is that it refuses to die. No matter how many times these characters get cancelled, no matter how much hate they get or how little money they generate, the social justice virus keeps bringing them back to life. Where before, creators would eventually surrender and begrudgingly accept success after toning down or getting rid of the character everyone hated, now being tolerant or being a good ally demands sacrifice of success. So now we have Star Wars movies with devastating returns, and indie comic book writers who can compete with Marvel and earned revenue. People don't want to read perfect people solving dilemmas with no real opposition. People don't want to read about people who don't have flaws or don't have to earn what they get. Half the fun of the original Star Wars trilogy was seeing Luke discover his new abilities and battle a powerful enemy while learning what the Force represents. We all have an ideal version of ourselves. That's what we strive to become. We want to be smarter, stronger, thinner, better looking. It takes work to get there. A journey, you might say. It's the journey people want to see. I mean, why do you think people hate spoilers so much? They want to see what happens. And Mary Sue is the avatar of spoilers. There's no journey, no growth, they're everyone's favorite and the world hands them everything. And everything they're involved in jumps right to the end. But weaknesses, flaws, vulnerabilities, shame. Social justice advocates say these are things female and minority heroes don't have. So why do so many SJW characters trigger that little Mary Sue alarm we all have in the back of our minds? Because the ideal role model character for the social justice crowd is nothing less than a Mary Sue infected with terminal social justice.